Good evening. Welcome to Investigator News, and this is Election Eve. Election Eve. Well, I want to tell you something real quick about this election. I went to vote today. Well, I don't think it's kind of low. I voted. And right outside, there was a lady that came up to me and said, be sure to check your ballot before you stick it in the final machine, because there was a gentleman that threw a fit. He was mad, he was angry, he was yelling because his vote had changed. So make sure, folks, it was a presidential change, she said. And then I found another guy that was in line with me that heard about it, but he actually talked to the guy that had it happen. So I took it for truth. Um, I don't know. Check your ballots before you stick it into the last machine. Just make sure what you picked is on there and it's correct. But I want to start off with I was just floored by this one. Biden spent billions to delay Medicare premiums. Democrats were confronted earlier this year with a terrifying reality: a cap on out-of-pocket costs for patents to limit Medicare drug spending passed as a part of Biden's signature Inflation Reduction Act. Okay, so the administration spent $5 billion budget gimmick, and it kicked off to be kicked down the road. Well, what they didn't say, it only adds a possible $20 billion in additional spending over 3 years to cover up they say, unintended consequences. Oops, we made a mistake. One of Biden-Harris administration signature laws. What they don't tell you is it's going to cost taxpayers, but mostly senior citizens collecting their Social Security. They created new programs to send billions to health insurance companies to temporarily offset the premium increases, but that didn't work. That backfired. So this could have spelled a really bad disaster, but they're hoping that once she gets in, she can maybe fix this, is what their answer is. Yeah, they used it to kickstart her campaign. Yeah, they blew money sending it to health insurance companies. Oops. But now it's going to add additional 20 billion to, was it billion or million? I want to make sure I get this right. Billion. An additional spending over 3 years to cover this up. But not only that, but it's will cost the taxpayers and seniors in the long run for the next 10 years. Wow. William, that just floored me when I read that today. I mean, I know there's oopsies, and I know our presidents of the past have made oopsies, but this is going to end up costing a lot of money. A lot of money. Anyway, hundreds of New York Times tech staffers go on strike ahead of Election Day. Do we care? I don't know. They were disappointed that colleagues would strike at this time, according to them, especially the day before election. The planned walkout came after a vote on September 10th to go on strike as a critical juncture if a deal wasn't made. They anticipated that their subscription base, they would go up, and then they would all get raises. So I thought it was because they didn't pick the right candidate, but no, it's got to do with wages. So we'll see. William, like I said, I really don't care about that. They can go on strike. It's just one less paper to have to fool with the election right now. And how many news organizations? If Trump wins, folks, how many news organizations are going to choke? And the same and vice versa. If Kamala Harris wins, they're free to celebrate, but then they have to realize the change of the country. And William's got stuff later on for that. William, go ahead before I.
So the New York Times going on strike is, you know, it's what it is, but it's the timing I'm concerned with. Are they concerned that if they report on what actually happens in the election, they may get sued for false reporting and election interference? That may be have more to do with what's going on right now than workers' salaries. That
I bet you there's more. There's more to it. I bet we'll find out.
The reporters don't want to be tied up in something they can't get out of. You know, step in something they can't wash off. So, so I think it's a little bit of cowardice as well.
Yeah. And then we got Iran and of course Netanyahu and Israel, and Iran threatens to use more powerful warheads against Israel in this next attack. It's building up, is what I see. They said they don't want to influence the U.S. election with an attack on Israel, but they have warned and they are planning the country's next attack using more powerful warheads than previously used. Despite U.S. warnings against their counterattack, according to the reports. Iran and Arab diplomats reported that its conventional army would be involved in future attacks against Israel after losing 4 soldiers and a civilian. And not only that, but they have killed another Hezbollah leader. They say that it could mean the Islamic Revolutionary Guard that typically deals with Israel's security measures may not act alone and may add further Arab diplomats to the fight. And then Netanyahu, basically, he's planning, and he signaled Tehran's nuclear program could be the next target as Iran plans a future attack. Me and William talked about this today, and it's starting to it's building up, William. You can see it's getting further and further more. We're going to get your nukes. We're going to do worse. We're going to send more missiles. We're going to go after your nuclear program. It's building up as a force for a bigger war than what's over there. And William had something real good to say today that, it's kind of enough. It's been pushed enough. Israel needs to deal with Hamas and Hezbollah. But even though Iran has interfered, folks, it's time to maybe start winding down a little bit and looking at the damages. William, go ahead. I'm going to let you take it because you've said it way better today.
So, in any adventure, we'll call war an adventure. Of course, Israel was attacked, so they had to respond, but it's still a military adventure against an enemy. There's a point at which there's diminishing returns. And anytime you're involved in a war, if you're going to be, if you will, decent about it, you want to try to limit casualties, not just on your side, on both sides. It's to get the political squabble over so that the death, there's a cessation in death. Now, our Israeli friends, they're a really smart bunch. General Gallant, their Air Force, they're apex predators in their neighborhood. All right, and and they're really good in the market. They're really good in our digital space. They're marvelous at creating companies and industries. They're really good at those sorts of things and making things work whenever something has worked in the last, 120, 200 years, whatever. But they get, pilots get what's called target fixation. and they get so fixated on the target they end up driving the airplane right into the ground. And I'm concerned that Israel is fixated enough on Iran that they could end up in a situation where their losses are greater than they already are. That this might be a place to say enough's enough and try to spool this thing down. Incrementalism in war leads to escalation almost always. It takes a very, very strong leader to use incrementalism to spool down a war. I think the Israelis have that capacity, all right? The internal mental capacity to do that. But I'm concerned that they're a little too fixated on Iran. And if for whatever reason Iran was to hurt one of our United States boats, you know how we get about having our boats messed with, we could end up in a regional war really quick. And where we have a current administration that's not the most decisive, we'll just say that. And, you know, today Blinken even got on TV and he had his speech about the Israel conflict. And every time this is my opinion, every time he comes on the television media, he just encourages our enemies.
Yeah.
He just comes off so milquetoast. Anyway, that was my thought on it. Now, Israel is trying to pursue a ceasefire with Lebanon. The only problem is so many of the Lebanese are inculcated in Hezbollah. They're not ready to quit struggling.
Well, no, because, you know, William, this is going back to what we said throughout the last couple of years, is there's a mortal hatred to each other. And you know, those that protest over here and those that are like on the side of these Hamas and Hezbollah, they call them freedom fighters.
Well, every guerrilla group is either an insurgent or freedom fighters. Just depends on which side you're on.
Yeah, you know, they're there to save the Muslim religion and their culture and their history. You know, it goes back to those two different cultures and religions over there, and they just cannot stand the Jewish people.
They both sides, okay? Both sides are almost to the point of believing that if they're able to stop one of their foes on the battlefield, it ensures a place in heaven.
Yeah. Or they get 7 virgins.
It doesn't matter.
All the gold in the world and 7 virgins. I don't know.
This is a religious war for them.
Yes. Thank you, William. It's a religious war for them. This isn't about, you know, how we look at it, a terrorist against Israel or terrorist. This is a religious war up there.
Yeah, it's not an ideological war like we had with Vietnam. Or Vietnam when we were fighting Vietnam. That was ideological. This is religious. Everything
over in the Middle East it has to do with a religious war. And that's the way it's always been for thousands of years. So William, I kind of want to move on, if that's okay.
I'm good with it.
Okay. Mexico, folks. Now, I got an email. It was like warning from my friend and my source down in San Diego that lives San Diego, and she lives in Mexico and works in San Diego. So she's going back and forth, but she's originally from Mexico. And she did the right way. She said she paid 11,000 to become a citizen here and went through the course and did fine. And she said, she's proud. All right, but what did she warn me about is there has been a slump of migrants coming over the border. They're waiting. And she said the one thing about it is even Texas is saying that their numbers have kind of went down, but they did want to let everybody know that what they're waiting on is to see the presidential race. Because what she warned me about was if when Kamala Harris wins, they're storming the borders, they're storming the gates, they are going to hurt Border Patrol. Now, why do that? I mean, if you want to come into our country and you're going to storm the border, fine, but don't start beating up the Border Patrol and police or anybody that's there that's been blocking them for so long. And
the law and order benefits both sides, by the way. It keeps people from getting hurt. So
yeah, and basically, what they're saying is just over this last year, they wanted to let everybody know that there has been approximately more than 1.5 million apprehensions reported just this year. There's over 450,000 getaways, plus they don't know who else has gotten through. But they're saying there's close to 400,000 criminals that went over the border too, that's gotten into the United States. That after they checked them out, they found out that these are criminals from other countries, and some were even terrorists. So now, William, the whole thing is, if now Trump wins, they plan on just trying to storm the border and causing protests and a big scene. They're going to try anyway. So either way, they're going to storm the border, they're saying, is what.
So these people are holding back because there were talks. I don't know if they were explicit talks or talk back channel talks to keep people from coming through the border in the great numbers, running, right near the election. So that's not a point that one side can use against the other. But as soon as the election's over, well, the election's over, right?
Yeah. Now, the other one is, this is planned in California, folks. People in California, listen up. There's going to be a carbon tax, another one, of 152 billion. And it's going to be a set fund through 2046, which they're going to shut down most of the facilities for oil, gas, and anything that is not natural for the state. They said it could raise your gas prices of a tax of almost $1 or more out there. The thing about it, folks, when something like this is voted in, I was talking to a few at the polls today, and I mentioned this, and they said, well, Trump can get in and he can take it away. No, not necessarily. Now realize, when a state puts in a law and it's set by the governor, of a sitting president cannot go in there and stop it. It's just like what they did in Texas when they changed some of the laws for the migrants coming in. They changed that little bit. Well, Biden nor Harris can come in and change it. And that's the same thing with this. California, if you don't work out your Congress and your senators tomorrow, there's a good chance you guys will see this. It could be $1. They say $1 to $3 more for gas. I think it's already 4 or 5 out there. I mean, it's going to be crazy Alaska prices. Can you imagine what's going to be like in Alaska? Prices start going up. Now get this. They're warning now that in this article that this could, boy, William, you're not going to like this. They are also trying to get Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Arizona to do the same thing.
Yeah, imposing their will on the weaker states.
Yeah.
So California, if it's all by itself, is like what, the fifth largest economy in the world. So they can impose their will on nearby states. And frankly, they want to impose their will on the rest of the country. They want to normalize things. Okay, I've said my little piece.
Yeah, you know what the other thing there that bugs me, William? And I seen a guy that he just drives through different places. He was driving to California, and I remember driving down, I think 99, and you get into where the growers are, and it's just field after field after field of produce and produce and produce. Well, he drove that, and it was dead fields. So I got a hold of him. I said, "What's give me an idea of what happened." There's some millionaire, and they really don't know who it is, who went through and bought all those farms up and drove them out. And with the prices of water out there, they farmers just lost their farms, and they're not going to do anything with them. And a lot of our produce came from California across the United States.
California, when they allowed voter ballot harvesting, okay, they made a law, they made it legal. It was never legal before that in the United States. Well, California made it legal. And the next election, Orange County, which has always been a Republican stalwart area, went completely Democrat. The state almost went completely Democrat.
Yes.
And since then, it's just been one inflicted damage on the state by its legislature and governor, one right after another.
I remember when Governor Brown was, oh my God, the things he did, it was so radical. And I mean, we were like protesting because I was young back then. And I remember when they said we couldn't have water in the restaurants no more out there because of lack of water.
Well, it's just self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah. And, they didn't have no reason for it because back then the water wasn't that bad back then. But it was about conserving. Remember, we talked about ecology earlier. And even we had a lot of water coming in until they had little fish. Remember the little fish up there? It was towards Oregon, in Oregon too, that we had to push all the fresh water into the ocean so we wouldn't. Was it a smelt? And not only that, they had the stupid spotted owl in the trees that they wouldn't let clear cutting happen. When they were clear cutting and keeping it from fire danger, they stopped all that. This is 70s and 80s, just so to save the owl. And then when they went and looked, there was no really any owls there.
I don't think people recognize to have fire breaks. These are just areas that are maybe 100, 200 yards wide through a forest. If you run a fire break through a forest right in half with these fire breaks, if there's a forest fire, one half the forest, the other half saved. If you have two fire breaks dividing it in half, 1/4 of the forest can burn and 2/3 are saved. In those areas, you need to clear cut. Now, in other areas, you need to go in and selectively harvest because trees grow at different rates. They propagate at different times, unless they're planted like they're planted in Europe, where they're just planted in rows like a cornfield. But you have to manage these, or they'll get to a point where they're diseased, and it just takes one lightning strike. It just takes, somebody throwing a glass bottle out that sits in the sun and creates a little hot spot, and boom, you're off to the races.
Yeah. So, California, beware of your costs going up and taxes, definitely. Now, I want to move over to, well, DHS put out a report that identified, they say more than, they're saying in between 6 and 900 migrants with possible ties to the Venezuelan gang uh, trend Raga. And what the problem is they've now infiltrated quite a few um, apartment complexes in New York now. They've overrun, just like they did in Springfield.
Trendy
Now,
Agua.
yeah, and see now the whole thing is, William. Now they're seeing the same thing with MS-13 in San Diego and LA, and even up into
They
San
put
Francisco now. So
they put that little spot on the news that we saw that one day,
yeah,
and they were trying to get into the one apartment. They had staircases on
right.
either side.
They're not reporting it.
That's what we saw, right?
Mm-hmm.
The gang saw something different. They saw a guy running back and forth with a telephone, and he's not in control of what's going on in an apartment per se, but he's in charge of having cars that can come up immediately, pick them up, and disappear.
Yes.
In two different directions. He was looking out both different directions, and he was deciding where their escape channel was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So they could hit these apartments, be there, do their thing, and be gone in an instant, and the police just can't catch up.
Yeah.
The other gangs saw that. It was put out on the national media.
Now, the other thing that I found out was when they were brought in, we flew them in, for one, and then we gave them amnesty and put them all in sanctuary cities. Now, Colorado's having problems with them, and like I said, it's not just. We need to remember it's not just this Venezuelan gang. There was also some out of Colombia that was flown in from a prison because they were overcrowding. So they packed them up and moved them out. And also, even we got to remember MS-13 because they're pretty much got into most of the gangs all throughout California, but they're having problems in all these other sanctuary cities. And when if Kamala Harris gets in office, the sanctuary cities are going to be considered protected areas that cannot. What I'm hearing out of the Capitol is they might be passing something that could protect them to where they cannot be removed. And William, this just irks me. Now, if Trump gets in, they're going to, and we talked about this last night. There might be an uprise. He's going to start unloading them, and I think he's going to drop sanctuary cities. And so after the vote is going to be a deciding factor, they say, about our crime rate in these cities. Now, New York is now starting to be fearful because they don't have enough police officers to do anything about this Venezuelan gang that now has overrun quite a few apartment complexes. Now you're talking, let's say 900 of them here in the United States. That's a lot, William, because they get right in with the gangs and they get right in with the terrorists that's already here. And they're just
even if they
building.
get snatched up by the police, there's zero bail. They're arrested. 2
And
days
let
later,
go.
they're back on the street doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yep.
There's that big push for zero bail because it's unfair to people who have less money because it forces them to stay in jail until their until their trial. And you can see a reason. You can see that there's reasoning in that, right?
Yeah.
There is some good thoughts going on, but it's been abused. And they have to come up with a system that's that's not being so completely abused. There's the other thing is these sanctuary cities are violation of federal law.
Yeah.
When you pick up a non-citizen, a spy, if you will, if they're here illegally and have no documentation, a spy, and don't hand them over to the federal government, think about that one.
Yeah, and we're letting the Chinese in. There are definitely a lot of spies in the middle of that, as well as Russians. And we would have, all they have to do is say, well, I'm from Guatemala, and they don't have no ID. They dump it all in the desert. Everything that they have, they dump.
Wait until the Justice Department finds the state a couple $1 billion, and then when they ask for help because they're a sanctuary city, right? Yeah. So they're going to tax the rest of the country for what they're doing in their sanctuary cities.
Yeah,
right?
And in the meantime, they're spying and sending stuff over to, like some of these farms where they have the spies living right next to it, taking pictures of our air bases and sending it back to these other countries.
Yeah, well, any completely undocumented person that hasn't gone through our border system, right, and gets the letter so that they can come into the United States and wait until their adjudication, which goes on forever. I'm not even going to get into that.
Okay, I'm gonna move us onto it's the same thing with what happens after the election. Now, Mexico now is facing a dilemma, they say, because they have got, I think it's Kawasaki that wants to put a plant there. But they said, it should have been done over a year ago, but they were worried about this election because if we see Trump, there's going to be tariffs. But now, they don't really want to go for that. They would rather come to the United States. Well, it's not just Kawasaki, but 5 other manufacturers are now looking at that saying, ready to move back. But if not, and we have Kamala Harris, then they're going to go ahead and they're going to put more plants and into Mexico. Even a lot of our products that we buy here in the United States that are in manufacturing plants, they're planning on moving.
We have semi-trucks that are built here in the United States, lines of semi-trucks, right? Peterbilt or Mack or White, Sterling. There's a whole bunch of different brands. Well, we actually have a couple of these lines that are being built in Mexico. They're not being built in the United States.
Yeah. Well, see, what gets me, I'm worried about, I worry about the car manufacturers, but when you start hearing there's these other plants, like I think it was Maybelline and something that cans, I think, vegetables. They're even talking about leaving and going to Mexico because they know what's going to happen if it goes, the way the election, what happens after the election. So, that's looking at not only we're looking at crime, but the economy and our foreign policies, folks. Everything can change tomorrow night. Everything can change. And William had a big, quite a few points today and questions on this. Because what happens next, folks? And if there's Democrats watching, you have to realize that this economy, you're not better off than you were 4 years ago. The prices are up and it's only going to go up again. I'm not saying that the Democrats don't know how to budget, but they don't know how to budget. And what they've done is, and William, there was a guy that used to be, I think he was in Illinois. He used to be a governor and he got put in jail. I was listening to him the other day and he says, this isn't the Democratic Party. These are weird radicals that are out of control. And I don't mean to be mean, but just don't vote Democrat because you've always voted Democrat all your life. Now's the time that we have to look at the United States and what we want overall as everybody. We need something that we can survive. I seen a mother, boy, this is tearful. get on, I think it was Fox News, and she says, I don't have the money to even feed my kids anymore. Do I pay my rent? Do I pay my electric bill? The amount of gas it takes to get to and from work. I can't. What do I feed my family? We're down to nothing. And it reminds me of the Depression, folks. I don't want to see this country go there because it's going to be so horrible. And it's not because now, over the last, I'm going to say 20, 30 years of elections. Now, we've seen Hillary in there and we've seen Obama. The thing is, they're getting younger and kind of younger type of liberal extremists. And more, and I even seen at the polls and talked to people at the polls today that were Democrats that said, I don't recognize my own party. I don't recognize, I used to like Democrats, folks. But we cannot have this country go any worse. These are inexperienced politicians. You can see their inexperience in our foreign policies, on the economy, on crime. Maybe they think they're doing good for this country, but they got to know that they've destroyed it. Is it for the one world order? Well, um, Klaus Schwab and Soros are mighty quiet right now. And I heard they're almost fearful because if Trump gets in office, the whole one world system is going to crumble. And I heard this out of Europe. And what they're saying over there is their people are uprising. They can't even eat anymore. The world is starving because they've stopped the farming. They killed the economy. Their crime rates everywhere, even over there. And the foreign policy, they're going to lead us right into war. And William, what was it you said? They don't even understand the big bomb, what it could do.
Right. They've listened to people that tell them what they want to hear. And most of these folks don't come from hard sciences background. They're humanities or they're life sciences, but not physics, not engineering, mechanical sciences, physics, optics. That's just not part of their world. So they listen to these climatologists, okay, we'll call them climatologists, that use the natural record of geology, and they're making these predictions about climate and whatnot. The thing is almost all of the carbon they're talking about is sequestered by nature. The actual fact is if you run automobile gas through your car and it goes through a catalytic converter, it doesn't come out as carbon monoxide, it comes out as carbon dioxide.
The thing is with everything flowing so fast, and the new ideas that have been invented. Eventually, we're going to have very clean gas. Not only that, but electric cars will run way better. They just pushed it too fast. They're pushing everything way too fast.
Yeah.
And using it for climate change.
Automatically. Good ideas will always prevail in the market. And if they have good ideas that way, it will work. But you can't force it on a consumer. Don't do it, because if you try to force it on a consumer, you're only destroying your own party.
Yeah. And then, William, we have to kind of look at, let's say, Taiwan and Ukraine. What happens after the election with those? Now, Taiwan is bad fearful. I was reading an article today that they say, they want to vote, they want to vote, but they don't know who is going to cut them off and let China take. They say they would rather have a big war and be with Camilla Harris because they want the war, they want to protect them, but they haven't even listened to the conservative side of their plans yet. So they're hesitant. And Williams, I read on with that because I know I mentioned this earlier today that they were thinking, they're just going to go with Camilla Harris because they're scared. Well, when you go further down, they said that, but they do trust that if Trump does get in office, he'll go over and sit down and talk with Jinping, and things might back off and there might be a compromise, not to lose anything, but just keep what they have there. Because there is Chinese, probably what, half the island, William?
10% are Chinese.
See?
That are sympathizers of Beijing. They will vote in the elections, whatever Beijing asks them to do. Okay.
Yeah. So,
there's Chinese there that still have ties to the mainland, right? They have extended family there, and they agree more with the mainland. But the island is also a sanctuary for those that fled China, literally fled for their lives, and they don't want to be controlled by this Communist Party. People don't realize Mao killed 100 million people in his Great Leap Forward by taking all the metal they could find and turn it into the government so the government could create factories. Well, they couldn't cook their food. They couldn't farm their land. And 100 million people starved. No problem, right? Well, it was no problem in Taiwan. It was a big problem in China.
Yeah. Now, when we look at Ukraine, though, now what's coming from Putin is now Georgia. Basically, they said Putin has said that he's been able to pull away from the EU, but it's only because the people he says, needed him. Well, then we look at Ukraine in this war. Now, Zelensky has said and stated that, and people realize he's communist. Zelensky is a communist, and he rules with the iron fist. And at one time, Trump had this settled out. Well, Zelensky says they're out of weapons. They're out of power. They need millions, billions more dollars. So after this election, we can maybe have a compromise. If Trump wins, boy, he's going to be going place to place to place, William, trying to settle all these skirmishes and these wars that's happened. But there's Putin and quite a few out of Georgia, because I've got some sources there, have said Ukraine is ready to give up. They're ready. It's ready just to go into working out with Putin on stopping the war. So
Ukraine is losing. In the last month, they lost over 600 square kilometers.
Yeah.
Of land.
Yeah.
Beyond the Donbass and the three other areas.
The thing is William, I heard this today. They're so happy because they killed a whole bunch of North Koreans. Well, they, like you said, they just lost all that land. They're not gaining anything. They're just...
Well, yeah, they were only able to push forward in one area 5 square kilometers last month. That's it. Against 600 kilometers, the Russians are pushing. And they don't have any secondary defenses set up because they were always trying to be offensive. They don't have a defensive bulwark. Russia took time to build their defensive bulwark before they started moving forward.
Yeah.
So not only does Ukraine losing those 3 provinces, they're probably going to lose everything all the way up to the Dnipro River. A third of the country moved by. Because they didn't try to settle this one. It was just a squabble.
And they should have. I don't know how many times me and William went over this. It was just a civil war between two sets of people. One, they want those that live in Ukraine to not speak Russian anymore. And they were pushing them and being hard on 'em. Like I said, they rule there, communist, that they have to be Ukraine. They can't be Russian. Well, how can you tell your 68-year-old grandma she can no longer speak Russian at the grocery store, or she's going to be arrested? See, that's a lot of how it started. But now look at it. I don't even think it's about that anymore.
Look, England, Great Britain, France, Germany has always had some enmity towards Russia, because Russia wanted to be part of Europe, yet be in Asia. And it's always been an issue. The aristocracy, nothing's changed with the aristocracy in the last 100 years, okay? Just the people have changed, the average worker bee, right? They're fine with Russia being in Russia. But these other folks, they've still got the mentality of, if we can take the land, we can control the land, it's power in our hands. And if we get somebody else to do it for us, all the better. And so they send out people to move things in that direction. That's what happened. We had people from the Prime Minister of England always going over there, for and in behalf of, the King. And we had some French ambassadors over there. And we ended up with a weak administration, and we ended up with Victoria Nuland over there, who just absolutely hates Russia as our ambassador in the area. We created a mess that we don't need. Nobody needs, except the people who are still living in the 1800s in their minds, because they're all cousins. They have to go to the same, family reunions, and some have better yachts than other yachts, and have better paintings, and have better chalets, and the whole bit, right? Their world's a big party. Their job is to find a wedge to get money out of each and every transaction. That's their job in the world. They see. Well, they're holding down their own economies. They're making their economies, if Russia decides, they can't defend themselves. Germany has created the biggest self-inflicted wound ever. Their economy this year is not going to grow even 1%. They're in a 0% growth economy. And when Germany, gets a cold, the rest of Europe gets a flu. This thing with Klaus Schwab and others is killing Europe. It's the aristocracy doesn't know it yet, but they're killing themselves. They're likely once again to bring Western culture to the brink of extinction. And here's the thing: the United States cannot war with Russia because we're both superpowers with nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And the first thing that disappears isn't going to be Russia, and it's not going to be the United States.
No.
It's going to be Europe.
Yes, they're too small. They don't have nothing for. Well, see, NATO. Was when I started seeing NATO saying, "Well, Europe doesn't got nothing. We need stuff from the UK or the United States, and we need these bigger countries to step in to cover for what Europe doesn't have." That's why NATO has never been able to stay formed.
That's absolutely great in a world that happened right before the 509th dropped the atom bomb. Yeah. History changed at that moment. Yeah. These people are stuck back before the dropping of the bomb. They don't realize, they can't wrap their heads around the fact that they can't do what they've always done. It's too dangerous. These weapons, they try to tell each other that they're just, tactical nukes and this and that, and they'll only lose neighborhoods and whatnot.
Yeah. When the biggest mistake that the United States did was let BRIC happen. And I blame this administration for it, because China, and then, we had China, Russia, and then there was a bunch of little countries. Well, then all of a sudden Iran's there, North Korea's there. They had, and then even some of the countries in Asia joined. And even India showed up to at this conference.
This is an outgrowth of OPEC, between when Russia and the Emirates and Saudi Arabia got together and decided they were going to control the price of fuel. Okay, this started under the Carter administration. The outgrowth of it is BRICS. Now it's metastasizing.
Yes, and it never should have. It never should have. And that's where the younger politicians, and I'm going to say on both sides, these younger politicians don't understand that you have to have a strong foreign policy. And I have always said, my dad had me on this, that you have to have a general or someone from the military that's either a president or a vice president, because your vice president is supposed to do your foreign policies. And it's been good up, and I'm going to say about Bush, then all of a sudden we got all these young senators and congressmen in, and we just don't have the foreign policies to not only protect ourselves, but protect our allies.
George H.W. Bush had an administration that was terrifying.
Yeah.
Literally terrifying to the world.
Well,
no, I'm not joking. It was a dangerous, dangerous animal.
Well, yeah, but at least we had.
By the time we got to,
we scared the hell out of everybody else, though.
So by the time we got to little George Bush, the wheels were starting to fall off the wagon.
Yep, that's like I said. It got to the younger generations. So anyway, I do want to move along, and I did find. Let me. I want to. I'm hoping it'll do this right, William. And then I'm going to let you talk about some questions before we leave for the night. Here we go.
Kamala Harris is bathing in the warm campaign glow that $1.2 billion in celebrity endorsements can create. But Kamala, Waltz, Oprah Winfrey, and George Clooney have no answer for Christina Parker, who has posted what I think is one of the most heartbreaking and riveting videos of the election season.
I have never watched my husband work so hard and us still have next to nothing. We've never had credit card debt, and for the first time in our lives, they're maxed out. So when I see celebrities and elites with trust funds get on TV and tell me what's morally right, I'm infuriated. Because you tell me what's morally right about rationing bacon to your children. You tell me what's morally right about not being able to afford Christmas for your children. When's the last time you've had to put back socks at Walmart because you can't afford to buy them for yourself and your children? When's the last time you've asked for your family to pay for groceries for a holiday? Because that's more important than your kids getting new books and new toys. Until you have to do that, shut your mouth about who we vote for, because we're barely hanging on.
I think I watched that 3 times. As painful as it was, that is an indictment of what Kamala Harris has done to this country. That is the America that Kamala Harris created, and that the elites on the trail with her are celebrating tonight. As they all show it.
Okay. heartbreaking, William.
Yeah, it's an emotional plea.
That is the state of America.
I want to move away from that, but I have some questions that as a veteran, right, that I want people to think of before they go to the polls. I'm not telling you who to vote for here. I'm just telling you questions that need to be answered. We're 4% of the population, and we affect monetarily 96% of the world. Morally, we have a responsibility here because of our wealth. Now, I know that lady's not doing well, but with the right president, we can superheat the economy, and they'll have jobs with money they don't know what to do with. But it takes the right leadership. Our system of monetary system and our government, the way it's set up and the way that it moves so slowly, gives stability to the economic world. And between that and free enterprise, nothing can stop that engine. It's a runaway engine that can just produce gobs and gobs and gobs of product, and prices of everything just go down. Okay, I'll just stop there. But whoever is the next president needs to superheat our economy. All right, here we go. Do you trust your pick for president? These are within the United States. Pick for president to be called on in times of natural disaster. Do you trust your pick and president to keep some states from imposing their will upon other states? Ellie just talked about that today. Do you trust your pick for president to negotiate in good faith with the House and Senate? Do you trust your pick for president to provide for a your security and a national defense? And those aren't the only things here. There are internal matters that the executive has to manage, right? Things like the EPA, FBI, Department of Justice, CIA, FCC, Health over at CDC. Then you have a plethora of public-private partnerships that need guidance. This all comes from the executive office. It doesn't come from the legislature. Okay, so that's happening internally. Now let's talk about externally, outside the United States. Do you trust your president to negotiate with our enemies? Do you trust your president to negotiate with the World Bank? It's the economy we're talking about. Do you trust your president to negotiate in the United Nations and the World Court? Do you trust your president to provide ambassadorships to all be filled, not just some be filled? Sorry, I have to flip the page. Do you trust your president to wisely use the national atomic football, the codes that only one man holds?
Mm-hmm.
Do you trust that president to use that wisely? Do you trust the president to keep fair international trade and travel, both in the air and on the seas, so that it can occur without trading partners being molested? Meaning hijacked, taxed, whatever on the seas, right? Not let go through the Panama Canal, or politically not be able to go through the Suez Canal. These are all things that can happen, and presidents, superpowers manage these choke points. Do you trust your president to deter aggression wherever it might arise to threaten the United States and the banking, mining, shipping, travel, and the risk to president to passengers everywhere? Do you trust the president to either accept or veto treaties with other nations like START? START was a treaty to reduce the number of nuclear warheads worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
This happened with the president, okay? So this is not just a national inflection point, this election. This is a global inflection point.
Mm-hmm.
Never has so few votes had or is going to have such a big effect in the history of the world as tomorrow. I want you to wrap your heads around that.
Yep. I was telling William earlier that this is going to be something big in the history books.
Right. This is like it during the war between Germany and Great Britain. The few airmen that stopped the air raids coming across the channel. And Winston Churchill said, never has so many people benefited by so few's, bravery. You as a voter are in that place of those pilots, those few pilots that saved Western culture. That's where you are right now.
And it's time to mend. We need to get a president in that's going to mend this nation as far as our relationships with both parties. I have always hated two parties, folks, because it's a divide. It's a divide between, me or you. And it always creates like what we've been seeing, name calling. This last week, this is horrible when one side wants to call just names. And it's not only call that person a name, but don't call the people that support this individual names. It's not the time right now with, like William said, this is world changing. This is the time to just name call. This is the time we have to look at the world, world war, world economy, our economy.
This isn't about just you now. It's about the next, 10, 15, 20, 30 generations of not just you, globally.
Yeah. So.
And I'm not going to tell you how to think, but I want you to ask those questions of yourself, because it's not just about you this time.
And it's something to reflect on as after the election, on what is going to happen, and all these questions we have to kind of look at, because it's going to be something serious for every single one of them. Well, William, I think that's it. I do want to say that they're sending out thousands of National Guard all over the country. Most of them are in Democrat states. They are still sending warnings that there's probably going to be some uprisings from the border to border. William, I thank you. This was a great show tonight. I hope everyone shares it and follows us on Facebook and hit the bell, folks, because it keeps dropping everybody to notify you that we're on live. But I thank you, William. And me and William will be here tomorrow night, real close to when the polls close. And I'm not sure how long. I think last election, I was on here for about 4 hours until they closed, weirdly.
So I'd like to say that, your vote is yours, but it's It's your responsibility. If you want to live in a free nation, in a free world, you have to choose it. You have to actually show up and make the choice.
Yeah. Okay, folks, that's it for tonight. Me and William will see you tomorrow night for the election. And be safe. Linda said that. Be safe tomorrow and after the election. And we know we're going to see some problems, but say a prayer. So thanks all of you for watching. And William, thank you tonight for all the add-ins and the information, the questions. And we'll have more tomorrow night.
I'm sorry to the folks that I had to be a bit of a Debbie Downer, with those questions.
No.
But they really, yes.
No, it should be, we should all ask that question. Same way as, do we want things to go on the way they are, or do we want to go back to 4 years ago? Was it better back then?